This video is a must-watch if you're passionate about miniature paints or thinking about giving your paint collection a proper update. I'll be crowning the top 5 paint releases of 2025 after spending the entire year testing paints for you. Which new paint products offer a genuine leap in quality that you'll feel in your day-to-day painting, which paint brands are worth their money and which ones you're better off skipping, I'll tell you in this video. Hi, I'm Stahly from Tale of Painters. I've been in the warm and miniature painting hobby for over 20 years, and for the last couple of years all I do is testing the latest miniature paints on my channel. And yes, I wear a funny mask while doing so. I'm a complete paint nerd and I maintain this library of professional hand-painted color swatches for you to download. In this video I've got 3 things for you. First, a full recap of every new miniature paint product released in 2025, and spoiler, there were a lot. Then I'll crown my top 5 to separate the wheat from the chaff, because the truth is, hobby time is far too precious to waste with subpar paints. And third, I'll also give you a look ahead at some exciting releases coming in 2026, as I've already got several secret prototypes on my desk and I would like to share a few of them with you. By the end of the video, you'll know which new paints are actually worth your hard-earned hobby budget. Right then, let's jump into the recap of 2025. The miniature paint segment was once again in full swing this year. For my list, I've focused on new paint ranges and expansions of acrylic paints aimed at miniature painters, whether for tabletop armies or display pieces. And I'm quite sure there's at least one release here that you have missed, so let's go. In January, the Masterclass paint sets from now retired legendary Games Workshop art director John Blanche were released. But not by Games Workshop as you might assume, but by the Army Painter. That caused a fair bit of friction behind the scenes and in the content creator sphere as well. Controversy continued in spring with the Ionic Smart colors, a joint effort between Big Child Creators and Ammomic, which later descended into a rather unpleasant legal dispute. On a more positive note, at Adepticon, the paints from the US starter Bear Cavalry were quite a hit. I've got them here already and my first impressions were quite positive, though I've not managed to make a video yet. Next up was a new Kickstarter from Scale 75, who launched Scale Color Games, a new sub-range of 48 colors. The Spanish colleagues at AK Interactive were also very active in 2025. Alongside a set of artist-grade acrylics, the Dense Acrylics, AK released a beginner-friendly line of brush-tip acrylic markers. The play markers seem to be a real hit, and 2025 was very much the year of the marker. More on that in a moment. And towards the end of the year, the Quick Gin paints finally arrived, AK's answer to Citadel Contrast and the Army Painter Speed Paint. Speaking of the Army Painter, they released speed paints in marker form this autumn, plus new War Paint historical paint sets that expand their Fanatic line. But let's stick to the chronology. In the second half of the year, Steamforged Games relaunched the classic Formula P3 range from Privateer Press via Kickstarter with an optimized formula and new metallics. From Pro Acryl we saw heavy body expert acrylics and 2 new AMP paint sets produced in collaboration with Atomic Mass Games. Chimera released signature paint sets as well as the Velvet inks, funded through Kickstarter. Towards the end of the year, the Dark Arts Kickstarter from Two Thin Coats was delivered, introducing 30 new Grimdark style paints. And at the Scale Model Challenge in Spiel in Essen, Vallejo's true metallic metal paints landed like a bomb. They promised to take metallic paints to a new level. Green Stuff World also released 5 new extra vibrant metallic paints at the end of the year, as well as a range of dry brush paints in May. Whew, quite a lot to take in. Have I missed anything major? Let me know in the comments. And now, from this long list of releases, I'll pick my top 5 of the year. And there's a little look ahead to 2026 coming up in this video as well. Let's start with the 5th place, and here we're talking about one-coat paints. One-coat paints, meaning ink-based colors that tint and shade in a single application, have become a hobby staple since the launch of Citadel Contrast. Other manufacturers like the Army Painter and Vallejo followed suit, and in 2025 AK finally joined in as well. Perhaps a little late to the party, but the overall quick-gen package is spot on. A well-rounded selection of 79 colors, including military tones and a few metallics, all at a very competitive price. At least in Europe, they're noticeably cheaper than speed paint or express color, and that's with AK's reliably high quality. In terms of consistency and brush feel, I would say they're the closest product yet to Citadel Contrast. They're a little thicker than speed paint or express color, which makes them slightly easier to control on the model, though they can sometimes dry a bit patchier on smooth surfaces. For this reason, when it comes to slap chop and Sanital undercoats, I personally reach for speed paint or express color instead, but for classic contrast style painting over a white or light primer, quick-gen is a fantastic alternative. The IMO best feature though is the intensity rating printed on the labels. Especially with Citadel Contrast, there are colors that behave more like a wash and others that have a very strong and dark tint, but how do you know before trying? With quick-gen there's much less guesswork now, and even if the rating isn't always perfectly accurate, it's still a very useful guide. In fourth place we have markers. Miniature paints in marker form were the big thing this year. At Spiel, every booth that offered markers to try was absolutely swamped. I spent a long time debating whether to nominate AK's Play markers, which are based on opaque acrylic paint with a brush tip, or the speed paint markers from the Army Painter. I eventually went with the speed paint markers because they work surprisingly well, and I also like that they are more sustainable thanks to their replaceable tips. Speed paint has already brought a new audience into miniature painting, and markers could bring in another, and together that's a fantastic signal for the hobby. Even though they are entry-level products, you can still achieve some really cool effects with them as an advanced painter. They are also incredibly quick and convenient to use. Just take the cap off and go, and they are easy to carry around. Speaking of convenience, on my website you can download a free hand-painted chart with all speed paint colors, highly accurate and with little symbols marking which colors are available as markers. You will find the link in the description and comments. I have free charts for contrast and AK quick-gen there as well. With these, I promise you will definitely find the perfect shade for your next project. In third place, I've chosen some paints that have been with me for many years in the hobby. Availability had been getting worse and worse over the years though, and other paint ranges had started to outshine them. I'm talking about P3, which was resurrected thanks to Steamforged Games and Kickstarter in 2025. The formula was carefully modernized and some weak covering or inconsistent colors were improved, but on the brush they still feel exactly as they used to. They are creamy and rich, fantastic for wet blending, and the finish is as satin glossy as you remember. I also appreciate that they now come in dropper bottles instead of pots. The completely reworked metallics are pretty good as well, with very solid coverage and a lovely finish thanks to aluminium flakes. All of the darker metallics are excellent, though for the lighter ones there are now better options out there, which I will talk about later in this video. Another minor drawback is the price. P3 is relatively expensive. Even so, P3 made it into my top 3, and for one simple reason. You probably know this feeling as well. You switch to a new paint range because you've heard the quality is so much better, you're happy with it, and slowly adapt your painting process. But somehow you end up missing that one beloved shade and still reach for an ancient pot lurking in your collection. That's exactly how I always felt about P3. There were some truly delightful colors in that range. Obviously, this is all a matter of taste, but together with Citadel color, the P3 palette was always my favorite in terms of color choices and selection. And you can see for yourselves. If you're as much of a paint nerd as I am, I've created a digital reproduction of the entire new P3 range with real hand-painted samples. You can find the chart in my Patreon shop for a small donation, and I've also got swatches of all the other popular paint ranges. Highly accurate, professionally digitized and cross-compatible, so you can perfectly compare colors across different brands. I'm looking forward to the second wave of P3 in 2026. I already have some of the prototypes, including several gorgeous new colors and some seriously impressive high-end metallics. When they're released, there'll of course be a free update for my P3 color swatch. Okay, so my second place is going to be controversial. It all started with something of a supergroup within the miniature painting scene. Spanish painting studio Big Child Creatives and Amomig, well known in the scale modeling world. Their joint paint range was named Ionic Smart Colors, but shortly after launch things got nasty, as I hinted at the beginning of the video. But my channel is about paint quality, not drama, and in terms of quality, Ionic is genuinely fantastic. The paints are creamy and intensely pigmented, and the many reds are a dream, especially the bright ones, which immediately became part of my daily rotation. Even more muted colors like browns and bone have brilliant depth and richness. The finish is matte with a slight sheen, which I really like. Blending, mixing, glazing all goes super smoothly. The metallics are a bit tricky though. They have very high reflectivity and sparkle, but separate very quickly, sometimes even straight on the brush. I will give you a better recommendation for metallics later in this video. But the non-metallic paints are top tier. If you love vibrant, saturated colors but do not want to deal with heavy body artist acrylics and prefer the ease of ready-to-go hobby paint instead, you should definitely give Ionic a try. For me, it is a new benchmark in the hobby segment, and one that upcoming paints will have to measure up against, such as the mini colors from Artis Opus and Cult of Paint, which are coming in 2026. Speaking of 2026, let's have a quick look at what is coming next year before we get to my #1 paint product of 2025. As just mentioned, Mini Color will launch next year. The Kickstarter was very successful and I've already been able to test the prototypes and was impressed. A real labor of love. Also funded via Kickstarter is Ultra Cruel, which is positioning itself as ultra premium in terms of pigment and raw material purity. Backers have already received their sets, so if you have them, let me know in the comments what you think. I hope they will reach retail in 2026 so I can test them properly. Then Reaper will return next year with a Kickstarter for a 2.0 relaunch of the Reaper Master series. And Förster, who developed the original palette of Master series, is back for this project, and I also got my hands on the prototypes. More about them soon. From AK we can look forward to an updated and expanded line of acrylic washes, now available in dropper bottles. And then of course we have the second wave of P3 with even more colors and a line of ultra premium metallics. What are you most excited about, and what should I make a video on first? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of my videos. I usually have reviews of new paint ranges before other channels do. Right, drum roll please. My #1 spot goes to... definitely not your run-of-the-mill acrylic paints. When it comes to standard acrylics, the bar's already set remarkably high. Whether you prefer Pro Acryl, AK, Vallejo or indeed the new Ionic Smart Colors, it's almost purely a matter of personal taste, as the quality differences are becoming increasingly marginal. But metallics, there's still room for improvement in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, there are already many excellent metallic paints in the miniature painting space, but I've always had to cobble together my collection for completely different ranges. A paint range where all the metallic colors are genuinely exceptional, from light to dark, silver to gold, and crucially those rainbow candy colors, that simply didn't exist. Until now. Vallejo's true metallic metal paints dropped at the end of the year and immediately worked their way into my daily rotation. Vallejo already had solid metallics in their catalogue, but with the true metallic metal range they've managed to bring together the best aspects of all their previous metallic paints in a single product. They're similar to the already excellent new model color metallics, so extremely high covering power and very fine metallic particles. They're also the first metallic paints that genuinely thin and wet blend well. You can even glaze with them without feeling like you're fighting against the paint. Tricky colors like bright golds and the rainbow-colored metallics cover just as well as the silvers, while remaining vibrant rather than the washed-out pastels you often get from colored metallics from other brands. Vallejo True Metallic Metal is a complete system containing 20 color families, each with 4 paints, 80 colors in total. Each family includes a light metallic, a darker base paint, a matching shade wash and the base color again in a pre-thinned airbrush version. If you can only pick up one new paint range from this video, I would suggest True Metallic Metal, and no, I'm not being paid to say that. But be aware, you probably don't need all 80 colors. I would recommend the light and base paints first, as the shade and airbrush versions aren't quite as essential in my opinion. I'll explain why in my True Metallic Metal deep dive video on the right, so make sure to watch that next. You'll also find reviews of all the other products in my top 5 on my channel. Thanks a lot and happy hobbying!